Teddy Knight, the newest addition to Blue Lock's ultimate faction, the new Gens 11. An addition that immediately seemed off the moment Teddy was introduced. I mean, for starters, he seems to completely lack any ego. And secondly, he also calls himself a worthless puppet. And while this obviously makes him very unique, especially for a show like Blue Lock where it's always about ego, I gotta say, for me, he seemed to be a lot like Lorenzo. I mean, before we even get to ego, the way he dribbles seems to remind me a lot of Lorenzo. They both seem to wobble and evade the defenders through their dribbles. And while obviously Teddy does it through speed, and obviously Lorenzo does it through his wobbliness and his zombie steps, I feel like both of their dribblings seem to be the same, because they both actively slip by in order to evade the defenders. But obviously, the ego comparison with Lorenzo is far more important, because first of all, Lorenzo also has no ego, and in a sense, he is also a puppet to Snuffy. I mean, the guy straight up was barking like a good boy when Snuffy ordered him to go and train. And I don't know about you guys, this already made Lorenzo very special, and we liked him specifically for this and for being completely different from the other new Gen 11s. However, I'm not so sure it works with Teddy to the same extent, because the idea of being very oppressive while presenting no ego already worked with Lorenzo. And so I don't know if making Teddy a cheap copy of Lorenzo is the right decision here. I would not like to see it, you would not like to see it, and to be honest, I even doubt that Kanshiro is that naive to make Teddy a cheap copy of Lorenzo, especially for the best faction in Blue Lock, the new Gen 11s. I mean, he is constantly going above and beyond to make each and every member completely unique from the others. And so there must be something very interesting, or I should say something very wrong with Teddy that would differentiate him completely from Lorenzo. And I say something very wrong because no healthy person would call himself a worthless puppet. In fact, I would say there must be a dark side to the Knight that was hiding in plain sight the moment he was introduced. And well, that dark side has everything to do with this line specifically, when Teddy said that Fox ordered him to convince Japan to lose on purpose. Now at first we all thought that Fox must be a teammate of Teddy or even his coach, and that he is a character that is very deceitful and relies on cheap tactics in order to win. But I gotta say that there is something very wrong with this line of thinking, because for Teddy, who said that he doesn't like to have an ego and that he hates confrontations and would otherwise rather just to glide through life, it seemed very out of character for him to go above and beyond to follow whatever Fox was demanding. I mean, the guy went and confronted the whole team, which doesn't seem to be fitting at all with him calling himself a pacifist and that he hates ego specifically because it creates conflict. In fact, the same guy who said this at one point went full aggressive and hit Bachira in the face with the ball because he was laughing at what Teddy was saying. And there is literally no other way to look at this except that this is completely out of character for someone like Teddy. I mean, no matter how cunning Fox might be, Teddy seemed to be in conflict with himself right here. And also he very easily realized that Isagi himself is in conflict with himself. However, what if I told you that Fox is the conflict? Fox is not deceiving or even ordering Teddy around. In fact, Fox might be much complex than what we thought before. And in order to explain that, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the biggest theory in the England versus Japan match. The theory that is at the core of today's video. What if Fox is not a separate character, but rather what if Fox and Teddy are the same person? Two faces to the same coin. Ladies and gentlemen, what if Fox is an alternate ego to Teddy? Now, before you call me crazy, you have to understand, Kanshiro is a psychological genius. The amount of psychology and psychiatry introduced and used in Blue Lock is honestly astonishing. In fact, I think in this area specifically, Kanshiro might be actually untouched, with the exception to maybe Attack on Titan, which also had a lot of psychological elements into its writing. But that's actually a valid comparison because, believe it or not, Attack on Titan plays a huge role in today's theory. Specifically here, I'm talking about Reiner and how through him, Isayama beautifully wrote a perfect application of the split personality disorder. And this immediately, by the way, signals to me that Teddy might become one of my favorite characters because Reiner is my favorite character in Shingeki no Kyojin, specifically because of the way his personality is split. However, even though I think Attack on Titan is very close to Blue Lock in terms of employing psychology, I think Reiner's disorder would not fit with Blue Lock that much, specifically because it is guilt-induced, and the way Reiner's mind broke was all due to the amount of blood he had on his hands. However, I feel like with Blue Lock, we need something more grounded. We need something similar to what was explored in Kuroko no Basket, which, as you all know, is the anime that inspired a lot of aspects to Blue Lock. And so, in order to better understand how the split between Teddy and Fox would be perfectly written, let's explore the case of Akashi Seijiro. You see, by its nature, the human brain has many fail-safe designs and systems that are meant to prevent the total breakdown of the mind. And one of those fail-safe systems precisely describes the case of Akashi. You see, when a person, especially young, faces a reality so brutal, so hyper-aggressive that their gentle souls cannot survive it, the mind does not break or give up, but rather it miraculously divides. It triggers a structural split as a fail-safe. The brain literally thinks like this: this terrifying thing, whatever it is not happening to me. It is happening to someone else. And more often than not, that someone else is ruthless enough or powerful enough to handle whatever situation the person is going through. Then, the brain, in order to hang in there, believes so much in the presence of said person that it can no longer distinguish this created character from a real self. And thus the other self is born. And this is exactly what we saw with Akashi Seijiro in Kuroko no Basket. Born under the crushing dictatorial pressure of his father, the gentle Akashi who just loved basketball could not handle the threat of defeat at the hands of Murasakibara, and by extension also getting left behind by Aomini. And thus to survive this, his mind fractured. Gone is the beloved captain, and out stepped the cold absolute emperor Akashi, a ruthless defensive mechanism born solely to ensure that Akashi would never lose again. Now, obviously, Teddy does not need to follow the same story. In fact, that's the beauty of it all. Kanshiro many times established how ruthless the world of Blue Lock can be, and thus he can choose from a plethora of reasons into why Fox needed to be born, why the split between the gentle Teddy and the ruthless Fox needed to happen. But the main point of the whole thing would be that the almost pacifist Teddy could not handle whatever he was going through, and thus the ruthless, very deceitful Fox had to be born and take over in order for Teddy to survive. Then I think Kanshiro could take it to an extreme that we have never seen before. You see, because depending on how gentle the person is, his alter ego could mirror that with ruthlessness, which in this case again, judging by how gentle Teddy seems, Fox could honestly put Emperor Akashi to shame in terms of ruthlessness, which would immediately make Fox and Teddy the most interesting character in the entirety of Blue Lock. I feel like Fox has the potential to be the most aggressive, the most cunning, and downright even the first evil person we see in Blue Lock. Fox being an alternate ego might be the only chance that Kanshiro could get at writing an evil person. Now before we continue, you might say, why didn't Fox manifest against France? Well, an easy answer to that would be in Teddy's personality itself, because their game against France was the first match. Teddy did not feel enough pressure for Fox to manifest here, and thus Hugo and Loki ended up winning. However, if this is done correctly, Fox and Teddy might be even on their level. Obviously, the writer does not need to do that, but by making an extreme pressure to be the trigger for Fox to appear, I feel like the writer could write a broken character that could rival Hugo or even Loki and still make it very conditional that the loss against France makes total sense. However, here's the thing. This would not be an ace video if I did not blow your minds. And thus get ready, because in the next part, I am going to Kaiser impact the shit out of your brains. You see, you might think of the split personality disorder as a purely psychological phenomenon. You might think that it only affects the mind, personality, and mood. However, here's the thing. Biologically speaking, our mood, personality, and mentality affect our physiology to a great deal. Meaning that even within the same body, the mentality of the person could affect how the body functions. And you can immediately see how this relates to the split personality disorder, because the different personalities or the different alter egos could affect the body in different ways. Now, going back to our examples of Reiner and Akashi, we actually see this to a great deal. First, with Reiner, he went from being the weakest warrior to being the most reliable character in the entirety of the army. Do I need to remind you that in the new training, he ranked higher than Berthold and Ani, two characters who he ranked below in the Marley training. And the reason for all of this is the change in personality. Because Reiner had to kill his old self and create a reliable version of himself in order for the warriors to carry out with the mission. Reiner forced his body to evolve with him and become the most reliable person in the entirety of the army. However, again, I feel like it's more interesting and closer to Blue Lock with Akashi. You see, because the first Akashi was great, especially in working in tandem with other players. The new Akashi was completely absolute, and his personality even affected the physiology of his eyes, where he unlocked his signature weapon, the Emperor Eye. Obviously, the writer of Kuroko no Basket took it in a completely fictional route, but as I said, in psychology there are a lot of evidence that the personality affects in a great deal the body. And I feel like I have to give one final example to completely drive this point through and to reach the point where I blow your minds completely. You see, one of my favorite psychological movies ever is this one right here called Split, where the main character has a lot of personalities. However, the most interesting part in that movie for me was something that most people would not even remember about this movie. You see, one of his personalities actually developed diabetes whenever it takes over the body.
Diabetes? All the doctors, besides Dr. Fletcher, say that we're the same person, just personalities. Huh? How do you explain I'm the only one that needs these, you motherfucker?
Meaning a psychological change was strong enough that the body signals to the pancreas to stop producing insulin, and thus whenever that alter ego is in control, he needs insulin shots. However, the moment he switches to any of the others, the body immediately starts producing its own insulin, meaning the split personality could even affect the structure of the body. And here things could get completely out of hand, and I honestly would wish Kashiro would do this. You see, if Teddy is speculated to be a genius, Fox could actually be a talented learner. And this is done specifically like the movie Split, where the very structure of Teddy's brain would change in order for Fox to be a completely different person. Where Teddy is a docile freedom type genius, Fox could be a cunning restriction talented learner, kinda like how Kaiser is. And thus Teddy would move from someone like, I don't know, Bachira maybe, to someone like Michael fucking Kaiser. And again, I gotta bring Hugo and Loki here, because by presenting this, the writer could give us the first talented learner that is at the same time a genius, and who could even rival Loki and Hugo. And here in the England game, Japan would not beat England, they would actually just survive him. And the writer could pull this off by having Fox and Teddy conflate at a certain point, which causes Japan to win. However, Isagi, Ego, and everyone understand that they actually survived Teddy and not in fact beat him. This honestly would be perfect writing, and it would cement the England game as the absolute best game in the entirety of Blue Lock. I feel like if the writer pulled this off perfectly, this game could even be better than the finals of the U20 World Cups. However, hold on a second, how could this even be possible? How could Teddy be a genius and a talented learner at the same time? Well, you see, I truly believe talented learners are a special case of geniuses. While geniuses have their genius typically in their bodies, talented learners have their genius in their minds. However, in order to utilize the genius of that body, the brain of a genius is actually extremely complex and impressive. And I feel like if Teddy is originally a genius, through a very traumatic incident, Fox could be born as a fucking talented learner. And as I said, if this is done correctly, this would make Fox and Teddy the most interesting character in the entirety of the show. However, what do you guys think about this theory? Because I honestly would wish for this to be the case. Or if it's not done with Teddy, I wish it is done with another character. Maybe even Bunny. I feel like a split personality disorder would fit so well in Blue Lock, especially after what Ego said about how most of the big players having a very traumatic childhood. However, that's all I've got for you today, guys. I really hope I blew your minds today, and until next time, thank you for watching.